They finally uncovered what you've been carrying. Not with cameras, not with spreadsheets, not with the kind of investigation that leaves neat folders on a desk. They uncovered it the way desperate people always do when logic fails them, when their usual weapons stop working, when their control slips through their fingers like dust. They went to the shadows. They went to the unseen. They went to people who claim they can read what the eyes cannot see. And chosen one, what makes this story tremble is not that they tried. It's that they tried the same thing 12 times, on 12 continents, through 12 different spiritual languages, and they kept getting the same reaction. The same pause, the same tightening of the face, the same quiet refusal to continue. Because this wasn't curiosity, this wasn't entertainment, this wasn't let's see what happens. This was a coordinated spiritual reconnaissance mission, a desperate, organized attempt to locate your weakness, map your boundaries, and finally explain why you keep surviving storms that were supposed to bury you. And if you've been wondering why certain attacks bounced back, why certain predators got drained the longer they hovered near you, why the same people who tried to break you ended up unraveling, you're not imagining patterns. You're noticing laws. You're watching consequences move through the world like gravity. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, because what you're about to hear is not a bedtime fairy tale. It's a warning wrapped in clarity, a mirror held up to your life, so you can finally stop apologizing for surviving. And as you listen, I want you to breathe slowly and stay with me, because the core mystery is this. What is around you that fights back, even when you don't lift a hand? And why are the people who hunt you always the ones who look exhausted when they leave? Now we step into the first layer, the part they never planned to tell you, the hidden operation behind your photo. It starts with something simple, almost laughably modern, the kind of thing you'd scroll past without a second thought. A picture, a snapshot, a frozen moment where you're smiling, or serious, or tired, or just existing. And yet someone stared at it long enough to feel threatened. That's how it begins. Not with a war drum, but with a screenshot. Because some people can't handle the fact that you exist outside their reach. They can't handle that you walk away without begging. They can't handle that you don't collapse when they predict you will. And so they fund a mission. Quietly, indirectly. Like cowards who want blood but don't want fingerprints. They don't call it an attack, because attackers like to pretend they're victims. They call it protection. They call it research. They call it just checking. But the goal is always the same. Find the crack, then pour in pressure. You see, there are entire networks of people who believe power is something you steal, not something you become. They don't develop character, they develop strategies. They don't cultivate love, they cultivate leverage. And when you kept slipping through their traps, when you kept refusing to be defined by their narratives, they did what manipulators do when manipulation fails. They escalated. They outsourced. They went to the spiritual marketplace, where fear is currency and rituals are receipts, and they shopped for a way to label you. Because if they can label you, they can reduce you. If they can reduce you, they can control how others see you. And if they can control how others see you, they can isolate you, starve you, and eventually break you. But here's the part you need to hear like thunder in your chest. They weren't just trying to understand you, they were trying to understand what protects you. Because some of the people who targeted you discovered something terrifying. The more they pushed, the more they lost. The more they stalked, the more their minds started fraying at the edges. The more they tried to contaminate your name, the more their own life started leaking stability. It's like they kept touching a wire and pretending they didn't feel the shock. And chosen one, when a person keeps getting shocked, they don't always stop. Sometimes they get obsessed. Sometimes they decide the wire must be cut, even if it burns the whole building down. That's why they paid. That's why they traveled. That's why they gathered names and contacts, like they were building a private army of experts. And while you were sitting in your room wondering if you were too sensitive, too intense, too different, too much, they were spending fortunes trying to get answers you didn't even know were being asked about you. You were doubting yourself in silence while they were afraid of you in secret. That contrast alone should wake something up in you. If you were truly small, why would they need a global operation to study you? If you were truly harmless, why would they need spiritual specialists to confirm what they already felt? They weren't chasing a rumor, they were chasing confirmation. They wanted someone, anyone, to tell them that you were ordinary, that you were breakable, that you were like the rest. Because then they could go back to their comfortable illusion that they are the ones in control. But the first readings didn't give them comfort, they gave them dread. And that's where the story sharpens, because Section 2 isn't a collection of spooky anecdotes, it's proof that something looked back. Haiti came first, because Haiti is not casual about the unseen. In Haiti, the spiritual world is not treated like a hobby. It's treated like weather, like ocean currents, like something you respect because it can swallow you. They brought the photo to an elder who had seen enough to know the difference between performance and presence. They placed it near candles, and the room was steady at first, the way rooms always are before the air changes. The elder didn't speak quickly. They didn't dramatize. They watched. And then, as the reading began, the candles went out. Not one, not a flicker. Out, as if the flame itself received a command. And in that sudden dark, the elder went still, the way a person goes still when they realize they are no longer the one observing. Then came the sentence that made the client's blood run cold. This guardian predates the rules. That line is heavy because it implies hierarchy. It implies that whatever is with you is not something that can be summoned, negotiated with, or manipulated like a small spirit in a bottle. It implies something older, something assigned, something that does not answer to human contracts. And the elder refused to proceed until the candles were relit, not out of fear of you, but out of respect for what stood behind you. The client expected gossip. They received a boundary. They expected entertainment. They received a warning. And if that was all, maybe they would have called it coincidence. But Siberia didn't allow that lie. Siberia is vast and quiet, a kind of silence that makes human drama feel childish. They brought the same photo to a mystic who didn't even ask for your name at first. The mystic stared at the image, and for a long time, nothing happened. Then the mystic's face tightened, like they were listening to a language beneath language. They described an endless ocean, not water you swim in, but a barrier, a spiritual distance that made it impossible to reach you the way one reaches most people. They said it was like trying to throw a rope across a sea with no horizon. And the unsettling translation came next, delivered in a voice that didn't want to be responsible for the words. Your origin is not where they think it is. Not your passport, not your city, not your childhood. Origin in the deeper sense. The sense that scares control-obsessed people because it suggests you didn't just become this way. You were appointed. You were carried into this world with something already attached to you. And then came the Amazon reading, where the jungle itself feels like a living witness. The reader there didn't use candles, they used vision. They entered the trance the way a diver enters water, steady, trained, respectful. And what they saw made them jolt back as if they had walked too close to a cliff. A colossal eye. Not a cute metaphor, not a poetic symbol. An eye so large it felt like the sky had opened and stared directly into them. And the terrifying part wasn't the eye itself. It was the realization that it was aware of being watched, that it reacted to the attempt, that through a photo, through ink and pixels, something behind you could still perceive the intention of the one looking. The shock of it made the reader breathe differently. They told the client, "This isn't a person you read, this is a person you approach." That distinction matters. People who read others assume superiority. People who approach acknowledge power. And by the time those 3 readings lined up, the client's mission had already failed. They came to locate your weakness. Instead, they discovered your perimeter. They discovered that something around you is not passive. It is not asleep. It is not decoration. It is responsive. It is intelligent. And it doesn't like being tested. So now the story moves into the third section, the part that explains why your life has been a strange pattern of pain and survival, the terrifying upgrade you didn't ask for but somehow received. Because here is the twist, and it might make you sit up straighter. It's not only protection, it's acceleration. Some people have guardianship that is like a shield, a static barrier. But what they encountered around you was not static, it was adaptive. It was learning from every hit. It was growing teeth with every betrayal. And that's why your pain never wasted itself, even when it felt pointless. Every hardship became fuel. Every moment you had to swallow your pride and keep going became substance. Every night you cried quietly so nobody could call you dramatic became training. You thought you were just surviving, but in the unseen, something was being forged. Think about it. The things that should have destroyed you made you clearer. The moments that should have made you bitter made you discerning. The betrayals that should have made you shut down made you wiser, sharper, more careful with your energy. That isn't normal psychology alone. That is transformation with an agenda. And yes, I'm saying it plainly, survival wasn't random. It was charging a dormant force. It was waking up a part of you that cannot be bribed, cannot be shamed, cannot be controlled by social pressure. It was building spiritual muscle in places you didn't even know existed. That's why you can walk into a room and feel the atmosphere before a word is spoken. That's why your intuition kicks in like a warning light. That's why some people feel exposed around you without you accusing them of anything. Your pain didn't just make you cautious, it made you calibrated. And the people who tried to weaponize your suffering against you didn't realize they were feeding the very thing that would eventually stand up and stare back. That's why the hunters started feeling tired. That's why their games stopped being fun. That's why they began to sense deep in their bones that you are not the same person they first targeted. Because every cycle of hardship upgraded your frequency. It upgraded your authority. Not the kind of authority that shouts, the kind that stands there calmly and changes the room. And now we arrive at section 4, where they tried to do what desperate people always try to do once they realize they can't overpower something. They tried to buy it. They tried deals, severing rituals, and every shortcut that promises control without character. In New Orleans, where spirituality and showmanship can blur if you're not careful, they met someone who claimed they could negotiate anything. The client offered money, more than enough to tempt the average soul. The idea was simple. If you can't break the person, break the connection. If you can't reach the target, bribe the guardian. They set up an altar, they performed the ritual, and for a moment it looked like it might work, because deception often begins with a performance. But then the flames turned blue. Not the soft blue of a candle trick, but that unnerving blue that signals the air itself is changing. The practitioner went pale. The client thought it was drama until the practitioner whispered the message they felt land like a stamp. Already bought and paid for. That phrase should echo in your spirit, because it doesn't mean a human paid. It means a higher claim already exists. It means your life is not up for auction. It means there is a covenant on you that cannot be outbid. They came with cash and arrogance, and they left with the awareness that you are not spiritually homeless. You belong. Then Mongolia, wide skies, old traditions, the kind of place where severing rituals are not treated like party tricks. They attempted to cut the tie, to separate you from what stands behind you. The ritual began, and for a brief moment the practitioner felt resistance, like trying to cut a rope that isn't rope at all. And then it failed. Not with a bang, but with a silence so heavy it felt like the universe was unimpressed. The revelation came quietly, the way truth often does when it doesn't need to prove itself. You and the Guardian are intertwined beyond this lifetime. Not attached like a parasite, not bound like a curse. Intertwined like assignment, like design, like a thread sewn into the fabric of who you are. And that's when the identity escalation arrived, the sentence the client never wanted to hear, because it dismantles the fantasy that you're just a normal person who can be pushed around. You are something ancient wearing human skin. Now, I'm not telling you that so you can become arrogant or theatrical. I'm telling you so you can stop shrinking. Something ancient doesn't mean you're better than people. It means you're responsible. It means you were built to carry weight without collapsing. It means your life has purpose that will never make sense to people who only live for comfort. And this is where your motivation must become mature. Not hype, not temporary adrenaline, mature resolve. Because if your protection is real, then your calling is real. If heaven assigned guardianship, then heaven assigned work. And if they are trying this hard to study you, cut you, bribe your covering and label you, it's because a part of them knows what you've been avoiding admitting. The day you fully wake up, their old tactics stop working. So take this as your inner alarm clock. Stop calling your discernment anxiety. Stop calling your boundaries bitterness. Stop calling your survival luck. You have been kept. You have been preserved. And now the question becomes not why me, but what am I going to do with the fact that I'm still here? And once Mongolia delivered that final line, once the last severing attempt collapsed into silence, the people who funded this operation didn't walk away humbled. They walked away offended. Because there are personalities on this earth that treat any boundary as an insult, any no as a challenge, any mystery as something they deserve to own. So the mission moved from probing to provoking, from let's see what's around you to let's force it to respond. And that's when you crossed into the next layer of this story, where warnings and retaliation draw a cosmic law line that not even money can erase. In Egypt, they went to someone who had a reputation for binding, for containment, for sealing forces into circles the way ancient people sealed names into stone. The practitioner laid out the circle with precision, not the messy kind of spiritual cosplay, but the exactness of someone who believes geometry can control destiny. They placed your photo at the center, spoke the words, traced the edge, and for a brief second the air tightened as if the room itself was holding its breath. The client leaned forward, hungry for proof that you could be contained like everyone else. But what happened next was not containment, it was detonation. The binding circle didn't crack gently, it ruptured, as if the pressure inside it refused to be shaped. The candles flared and died, the incense rolled backward against its own smoke. The practitioner's hands shook, not because they were inexperienced, but because they felt something push outward with authority, like a seal being pressed from the other side. And then the hieroglyphs, the very symbols the practitioner trusted, became a message rather than a tool. Not a message for you, a message for them. Touch back. That's what the practitioner said they saw. Not in ink, not as a cute translation, but as a warning that felt like it came from a place older than their craft. Touchback means you are not dealing with an object, you are dealing with an intelligent perimeter. It means the moment someone crosses a certain threshold with malicious intent, the system responds. And the client who came to bind you left with the terrifying realization that the real circle wasn't on the floor. The real circle was around you, unseen, mobile, alive. Then they tried something different, because people who fear power love categories. If they can name you, they can shrink you. If they can assign you to a box, they can predict you. So they went to Ireland, to the old lines of land where people still talk about the thin places, where mist and memory and prayer feel like neighbours. The plan there wasn't binding, it was classification. They sought a reader who specialised in cages, not physical cages, but spiritual taxonomy. What is it, they asked? Angel? Ancestor? Curse? Demon? Gift? What label can we slap on this so we can treat it like a known variable? The reader listened, looked at the photo, and began to speak in a careful tone, like a scientist approaching a specimen, and then something in the room shifted. The reader stopped, stared, and admitted the first truth that always ruins control. It doesn't fit. The Guardian doesn't fit any system. It doesn't behave like the spirits they're used to naming. It doesn't respond like a curse, because curses leak chaos, and what's around you produces order. It doesn't respond like a demon, because demons bargain and feed, and what's around you seems to starve predators. It doesn't respond like a simple angel in the way people imagine, because it's not performing for anybody. It's not showing off. It's just there, doing its work. The reader tried again, reaching deeper, and the room got colder in a way that was not temperature but presence. And then the reader said something that made the client's stomach sink. you're misreading the relationship. You think it's a thing attached to a person, but it's more like a person assigned to a mission. The cage failed because the category failed, and when categorization fails, the ego panics. So they went to Japan, where classification can be as precise as blades, where spiritual discipline can be razor sharp. They brought the photo to another specialist, someone who prided themselves on mapping energies like constellations. They attempted a different kind of cage, a framework, a diagram, a grid that says, here is the entity, here are its weaknesses, here is the method. But again, the attempts slid off you like rain off stone. The Guardian didn't present as a creature inside the grid. It presented like a law outside the grid. And that's the cosmic law line you need to understand, Chosen One, because it explains why your life has this strange pattern where harm doesn't always win the way the world expects it to. There is a rule of consequence operating around you, and the people who keep testing it keep paying tuition in the currency of their own sanity. The rule is not petty revenge. It's not you getting even. It's a boundary in the unseen that says, if you cross a certain threshold with malice toward this assignment, you don't just fail, you deteriorate. Your luck starts leaking. Your mind starts unraveling. Your relationships start collapsing like structures built on rot. And you've seen it, haven't you? People who tried to ruin you suddenly get caught in spirals of chaos. People who mocked you start losing credibility. People who smeared you start making unforced errors. Their own mouths become traps. Their own hands become clumsy. And they call it coincidence because their pride cannot admit spiritual physics. But you don't have to call it coincidence anymore. You can call it what it is. A line drawn by heaven that says, there is a limit. And once that line was exposed, once the operation realized the Guardian wasn't just passive protection, but active enforcement, the smartest question finally entered the room. And that's where the wise question and the mission reveal begins. Because until someone asks the right question, they keep asking the wrong ones forever. In Australia, they went to an elder who didn't rush to power, who didn't treat spiritual things like entertainment, who didn't perform. The elder listened to the client's story, listened to the list of failed attempts, and instead of asking, how strong is it? The elder asked, why? That word sliced through the whole operation. Why would a guardian like this be assigned? Why would a perimeter like this exist? Why would a person be protected in this specific way? The client tried to redirect, tried to ask about methods again, but the elder didn't bite. The elder stared at the photo as if it were a letter from somewhere else. And then the elder went quiet. Not the quiet of confusion, but the quiet of someone receiving information too heavy for casual conversation. The elder didn't speak again that day. They didn't even accept more payment. They just said they needed time. And for days, the elder stayed silent. That silence was not absence, it was processing. Because sometimes the truth arrives like a storm front, and you have to let it pass through your bones before you can speak it responsibly. When the elder finally responded, it wasn't dramatic. It was sober. The revelation was simple and terrifying. You are protected for a reason. There is work to finish. Work that began before the map looked the way it does now, before borders, before empires, before the world was rearranged by human ambition. The elder didn't mean that you personally lived through continental drift, but that your assignment is ancient in purpose, older than your current storyline. And that's where the suspense deepens without turning into fantasy. Because work to finish doesn't mean you're a superhero. It means you are a carrier of a message, a frequency, a pattern of integrity that disrupts systems built on deceit. You're protected because if you were taken out too early, something wouldn't arrive on time. That's why certain storms didn't kill you. That's why certain accidents almost happened but didn't. That's why doors opened when they had no reason to open. It wasn't luck, it was scheduling. And the elder introduced an idea that might make you uncomfortable, but will also explain your inner pressure. The sleeping weapon, the dormant force. Not a weapon for violence, but a weapon in the spiritual sense, an instrument of authority, a capacity you haven't fully accessed because your life has been spent surviving, not reigning. A dormant force doesn't announce itself. It waits for alignment. It waits for timing. It waits for you to stop apologizing for your calling. That's why you felt like you're on the edge of something for so long, like your life is a hallway and you can hear the room ahead, but you haven't opened the door. The pressure you feel is not just stress, it is a part of you waking up, the part that knows you were not built to be constantly explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And now we move into the next layer, where the operation tried a different angle, not by attacking the Guardian, but by digging into your records, into the soul paperwork, into the archives they believed would expose your blueprint. And this is where classified soul records and general wake up begins. In India, they sought an Akashic reader, someone who claimed access to the record of your story beyond what you remember. They expected a full download, past lives, contracts, vulnerabilities, unfinished business. They expected to find the loophole. But as the tracing began, something blocked. Not gently, not like a book closed, like a door with clearance codes. The reader described it as reaching for a file and realizing the file doesn't exist in public access. It's there, but it's sealed. The reader kept trying, and the only thing that came through was a symbol. Not a name, not a narrative, a symbol like a stamp. The reader described it like cosmic clearance, like an authorization level the reader didn't possess. And that's the point. They were trying to read you like an open book, but your file is classified. That's why people struggle to figure you out. That's why narcissists get frustrated around you, because their usual methods rely on access, on reading your patterns, predicting your reactions, controlling your emotional weather. But if your records are sealed, if your deeper blueprint is protected, they can't script you, they can't game you, they can only guess. And guessing terrifies people who need control. Then they return to Siberia, not for the endless ocean again, but for a second opinion, someone known for blunt spiritual statements. The mystic listened, watched the photo, and spoke as if they were reading a military briefing rather than a spiritual one. There are servants lined up, waiting for the general to wake up. That phrase landed like an alarm bell, because it implies rank, it implies assignment, it implies you're not just being protected, you're being prepared to lead something. Not necessarily a public platform, not necessarily a religious title, but a role where your presence changes outcomes for other people. You felt it, haven't you? People come to you when they're at a breaking point. You say one sentence and their mind clears. You walk away from a toxic environment and suddenly other people feel brave enough to do the same. You carry authority even when you don't want to, even when you're tired, even when you wish you could just be normal. But the mystic's phrase also made it personal. The amnesia is expiring. The pressure you feel, the cracking sensation in your life, is not punishment, it's the shell breaking. It's the old version of you, the survival version, the apologetic version, the version that kept trying to be digestible, starting to fracture. Because you can't carry higher authority with a lower self-image. At some point, the mismatch becomes too painful. That's why your old habits don't satisfy you anymore. That's why certain friendships suddenly feel like suffocation. That's why comfort feels like captivity. The amnesia is expiring, and the operation that tried to expose you accidentally accelerated your awakening. Because every time they touched the perimeter, they reminded the sleeping part of you that you are not here to be consumed. You are here to complete something. And now, as the shell cracks, the evidence starts leaking into daily life. Not as mystical fireworks, but as recognition signatures. The kinds of signs that are so ordinary you can dismiss them, but so patterned you can't ignore them forever. Tech anomalies are one of the strangest because technology is supposed to be neutral, and yet you've noticed it. When your emotions spike, lights flicker. When you're about to make a decision, your phone glitches, freezes, repeats a number, a time, a notification. When you're in prayer or deep thought, a device restarts. A song plays at the exact lyric you needed. A call drops right before you agree to something you would regret. Some people will call it random, but you've lived with it long enough to see the coded patterns. It's not that you're controlling electricity, it's that your environment responds to your frequency shifts, and God can use ordinary systems to get your attention, to interrupt agreements you shouldn't make, to nudge you back toward alignment. Then there's animal recognition, the quieter proof that doesn't require belief systems. Animals don't care about your reputation. They don't care about your resume. They react to presence. You've seen it. The way dogs stare longer than normal, not aggressive, just aware. The way cats appear and sit near you like guards, like they're assigned to a perimeter they can sense. The way birds linger. The way certain animals offer strange gifts. Leaves, feathers, small objects placed near your path, as if the environment itself is acknowledging you. Sometimes when you're in danger, animals act like escort behavior, positioning themselves, distracting, creating space. You can brush it off, but deep down you know it's part of the signature. And then probability bending, the most practical evidence of all. Stacked coincidences, sudden openings, obstacles removed with no logical explanation. You apply for something and it works out in a way that doesn't match your qualifications. You miss a turn and it prevents you from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You think you're delayed, but the delay becomes protection. You lose something and it forces a better path. And yes, sometimes you suffer losses too, but even the losses funnel you toward the appointed moment, like a river that refuses to let you settle in the wrong place. Probability bending doesn't mean life becomes easy, it means life becomes guided. And now, as the signs stack, you enter the countdown and confrontation phase, because awakenings don't stay private forever. The guardian grows restless, not like an angry spirit, but like a force that knows timing. Reality begins to warp around the timeline, meaning the old patterns stop repeating. The cycles you endured for years suddenly break. The toxic people who always found a way back suddenly vanish or get exposed. The confusion that kept you stuck suddenly clears. It feels like the world is speeding up, but it's not speeding up randomly. It's accelerating toward alignment. You'll notice enemies imploding without you lifting a finger, not because you wished them harm, but because they kept leaning against a wall that doesn't move, and eventually their own weight collapses them. You'll see breadcrumb synchronicities intensify, repeated numbers, repeated phrases from strangers, repeated themes in sermons, songs, conversations, dreams. It's like heaven is leaving you a trail of glowing stones saying, "This way, stay steady, don't go back to sleep." And here is the final warning that will protect your heart if you can accept it. They weren't hunting you, they were stepping into the sights. They thought they were studying you, but they were actually revealing themselves. Every time they paid to probe you, they exposed their fear. Every time they tried to bind you, they documented their malice. Every time they tried to classify you, they admitted you are beyond their jurisdiction. And the moment you fully accept your assignment, you stop being the hunted in your mind. You start walking like someone who knows the perimeter is real, and your job is not to panic, but to obey. That's why we land this with the conclusion, because the thesis is not, "You're protected," like a child protected from reality. It's that containment is breaking on schedule. What's been holding back your full authority is releasing. You were kept whole until the appointed moment, and your awakening changes the board. So I want to pray over you, in Jesus' name, not with theatrics, but with clean authority. Father, cover this chosen one with your protection and your clarity. Seal their mind from confusion, seal their heart from fear, and seal their path from counterfeit doors. Let every trap be exposed before it closes. Let every false friend be revealed by their own fruit. Strengthen this chosen one with obedience, not emotion, with wisdom, not impulse, with peace that cannot be manipulated. And as the timeline accelerates, give them courage to follow you even when it costs comfort. In Jesus' name, Amen. If this message touched something deep, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Share it with someone who keeps surviving storms and doesn't know why. And in the comments, tell me your sign, the pattern you keep seeing, the moment you knew you weren't alone. If you want to support the channel, check the links in the description, but never feel pressured. And stay close, because the next episode is where we talk about what happens when the dormant force fully activates and what heaven expects from a general who finally opens their eyes.